Three, two, one, and I believe we are live. So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to yet another episode of the Bench Doctor. This time it's Milsurp Madness, or actually it's probably Milsurp and police trade-ins and that sort of thing. But Scott's going to walk us through some of the guns in his collection, talk a little bit about buying used guns, specifically Milsurp type, and hopefully you learn something, some tips and tricks, and you get to ogle his collection. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it right over to you. If you have questions, drop them in chat. One of the moderators will pick them up and at a convenient time ask them for you. If there's time at the end, we'll let people ask questions directly via voice. All you.
All right. Well, good afternoon. Thanks for showing up. I just wanted to, there seemed to be a lot of interest in buying and working with old military surplus guns and used guns in general. I brought a couple of police trade-ins, which are technically, I guess, a surplus. They're not military surplus, but the cool thing about them is, you can apply some of the same things that you would look for in buying any used gun. Milsurp is a little bit of a different rabbit hole to go down depending on what you want. But so I thought I'd go over a little bit of handguns, and I have some old military surplus rifles. I have an SKS, M1 Carbine, Enfield, a Nagant, and an old last-ditch Arasaka. And on the handguns, I have an old Webley 38 Smith & Wesson, a Beretta 92S, sort of the older brother of the 92 series, a Glock 21, which was a police trade-in, and then a Yugoslavian Tokarov. Well, they're over the M70, I believe they called it, Tokarov. So let's get started here. Let me grab some notes. And, pretty much for when buying used guns, period, regardless of whether it's a Milsurp, what the source is, there's just some stuff you want to look for. And I'll start with something more modern like a Glock, because if you're just going to go out and buy your first used gun, a lot of people new to the sport are, worried or reluctant to buy a used gun. I'll tell you one thing you don't need to worry about too much about, like the barrel being shot out. People are like, oh God, I don't want one with the barrel worn out. It takes a lot to wear out a barrel. And if you're at all doubtful about it, if you're at a gun store, or any Glock user should allow you to just inspect the gun. And first thing is check the crown of the barrel right here. Look at this part, make sure there's no nicks or dents, or that the edges are clean, and there's nothing rough or damaged in this area, because that will affect the accuracy. It's something that can be fixed, but it's not something I would mess with if I was buying a used Glock, because they're everywhere. Unless it was just a smoking deal, then you can buy aftermarket barrels for a Glock for $100. If you just want an everyday carry gun, or just a truck gun. I'm not sure. I don't carry any used barrels in personal carry, but I'm sure they're fine. I've run the heck out of them. So used barrels for Glocks, parts for Glocks are easy to come by, but you can generally break one, field strip it and take a quick inspection of it. So notice everything's got a trigger flag in it. They were all cleared. There's no live ammo on the bench, and everything had flags in it. But I'm going to go ahead and clear the gun. You grip it right here. Put your thumb up under the beaver tail. Pull back just slightly with your fingers back toward the beaver tail. Pull down. It's just that easy. And then the whole slide pops off. To field strip it, and to see everything you need to see to inspect it, pull the guide rod out, pull the barrel out, and you can look right down the barrel, and you can see the rifling in there. Now, it may be dirty. The number of people that sell used guns without cleaning them just baffles me, why you wouldn't clean it before you try to sell it. But you look down there and see it's pretty shiny. I don't know how well the rifling is coming through there, but you want to look down there. And if you don't see any rifling, pass, because it's either a major leading problem. Somebody's been running leaded ammo through it, just lead ammo with no jacketed rounds or coatings on it. And cleaning that out's a pain, or unless you're going into it knowing the barrel's trash and you want to put a new barrel in it. But so look at that kind of thing. You want to look at the bolt face, or the face here. Make sure there's no and, you know, that this is flat and smooth, that there's no gouges or damages in it. You know, look at your ejectors and extractors, make sure they're not broken off. This one, you know, you can replace that part. That's a super simple, easy replacement. But, you know, if I see one of these things is wrong, it's not going to stop me from buying the gun. If I see more than one, I'm going to pass, because God knows what else is broken in the gun. Sometimes people sell guns because they have no idea how to fix it. You know, the extractor gets broken and like, oh, I got to get rid of this thing. Well, you know, it's a $12 part and 10 minutes to fix it. I'm going to do a video on taking one of these apart and redoing the striker, replacing all these springs, replacing that part. You know, I can show you how to fix this thing very, very cheap if you can get a really good deal on a used Glock. Speaking of dirty guns, but you know, you're just looking for obvious problems. Are these rails in good shape? You know, does everything look clean, not damaged, not bent? You know, there's no major nicks or, you know, things like that. That's supposed to be bent, by the way. Just so you're just looking for that kind of stuff. And if it looks good and the price is right, pick it up. You're not going to go terribly wrong with a used modern striker fired gun. You know, they're pretty straightforward. So we'll set that one aside. This is a police. Oh, I wanted to also talk a little bit about, I forgot to put the guide rod back in, but I bought this used, and you notice all this holster wear up here, right? On the slide, you know, I don't know if that's coming through, but the bare spots of the finish, don't worry about that. That's cosmetic. It has nothing to do with the function of the gun, and the gun is fantastic. I doubt it's probably had 1,000, maybe 2,000 rounds through it in its entire life. That's because they've trained with it, and those are just hundreds of holster draws. The policeman that this was issued to probably holstered it 2 or 3 times a day, and the finish is worn down, but the gun functions beautifully. So don't let that stop you. Just knock a little bit off the price for that. It's not a big deal. Cosmetic wear isn't anything to worry about as far as the functioning of the gun. So don't let that deter you. Now, when you're talking about buying used military surplus guns, this is a Italian police issue Beretta 92. This is the 92S. It has the heel release. The European style mag release is on the heel, as opposed to the more modern 92 FS and the M9s have it up here where we're used to it. But internally, it's all the same. There's a barrel lug difference that's getting down into the weeds on these. But I picked it up online, $239. Most of the parts are still available for it. You can still upgrade these things. You can still put Langdon parts in them and really make them run great. The only problem is, for competition, you're going to end up doing two-handed mag dumps, or mag releases with these. You know, there's just no easy way to get down there. So it's not a very good competition gun, but it's a heck of a lot of fun at the range. And it's a great way to own a cheap Beretta 92 series. Now, this was made in probably the 70s, so I'm not going to go out and run a whole lot of super hot plus P ammo through it. That's just not what it was made for. It's got an aluminum frame, as do the later ones, but the barrel lugs are a little bit weak in the early 92 series guns. So just get some cheap, it runs steel case Russian 9mm all day long, feeds it and ejects it, no issues. But, the thing is, when you buy these online, you're taking a little bit of a gamble on them because they reach into a box. If you ever look at classic firearms YouTube channel, they get these things in these huge wooden crates, and they have hundreds of these guns. And you say, well, sell me a 92S, and they just pull one out of the box, wrap it up, and send it. They have a hand pick option where they'll pull 10 guns and give you the best of the 10. But you're relying on that person's judgment as to what the best is. Is it the best cosmetically? Is it the best functionally? I personally wouldn't pay them to get a hand select gun. I've heard too many horror stories of people just getting garbage rods from them. So this I bought through a company that's no longer in business, Southern Ohio Guns. But it's in fantastic shape. It runs like a dream. The slide is silky smooth like you expect with every 92 series gun. The difference is up here, this mechanism is different than it is on the more modern ones, but because they have a decocker now, and you can put the decockers on them and all that stuff. But $239, and it's a police issue Beretta made in Italy. So it's hard to find, anything wrong with spending taking a $239 flyer on a used gun in this case. So when you're buying these things, the first thing I would do if you're considering one is go out and look for magazines and parts availability. The magazines for these are different. You can't just, well, you can with a little bit of modification, take a newer 92 series magazine and run it in here, but you have to cut a indentation in the mag for the mag release to be on the heel, because on the newer ones they're up here. So you have to cut that notch down here, and you just leave the old one there. It's not going to affect anything. But in the case of this Yugoslavian pistol, you're only going to be able to buy surplus magazines for this thing. So go out and look. Do a quick Google search for the model of gun you're looking for and look for magazines, and you're going to see that you're going to get some sticker shock on the price of surplus gun magazines in some cases. Glocks, it's fantastic. They're dirt cheap. You can pick up, I haven't run an aftermarket Glock magazine that doesn't run like a champ in every one of the Glock and Glock clones that I have, but these are a little bit different deal. These you're going to be buying original Yugoslavian magazines, because the Yugoslavian Model 70 is longer than the say the Romanian or the Russian version of this. Those magazines won't work. Only the ones for the Yugoslavian guns will work. It looks just like a 1911 magazine, and this mag won't work in those guns. Those mags won't work in this gun.
Hey,
so
Scott,
yeah.
Sorry, there's a quick question from the audience. You haven't gotten to the rifles yet, but are there any suggestions of a good standard Milspec gun to start with for a new person?
When I get to rifles, the first thing I would do, budget-wise, there's two guns that I would start with if you don't have any Milsurp. If you have a little bit more discretionary income, go out to the Civilian Marksmanship Program website, download the application. It's a little bit tedious. You have to qualify, but being a member of the Liberal Gun Club satisfies one of the requirements, which is belonging to an organization, affiliated with the Civilian Marksmanship Program. And so you're gonna have to Xerox a copy of that, and then you're gonna have to prove that you participate in some sort of a marksmanship or firearms related thing. And there's a long list of things that qualify you for that. But you can buy a completely rebuilt from the ground up M1 Garand, and you're probably going to get a World War II surplus one, because they made more of them then than they did after. And for around $600 for a rack grade shooter. Now you can spend more and get a very, very nice weapon if you're going to want to spend upwards of $1,000. But the CMP is a great place to start if you have $600-700 laying around. If you don't, right now, there's a few places, I think AIM Surplus, and I think Classic might have SKSs right now for around $300. And SKSs are fantastic guns. They're just a lot of fun. If you don't know anything about them, they're sort of the precursor to the AK-47. They came into service right after World War II. And they share some, they come from the same family. It's Simonov versus Kalashnikov, but slight variations. But they're really fun guns. They shoot the same ammo. There were some models sold that would take AK magazines. Most of them have a 10-round fixed magazine. There's a lot of Chinese SKSs available still, being imported in from other places. They're not being imported from China, but they're being imported from places that got them from China 20 years ago. And they're still packed in cosmoline, which is another subject I'll get into in a little bit. But, AIM Surplus, I think, might have them. I believe Classic still has them. Palmetto State Armory might even have some of them. But you can pick them up right around $300 right now. And they're super easy to work on, and parts are readily available for them. In some cases, some parts like the original magazines are hard to find. And some of the original blade style bayonets on the Eastern European and Russian ones are a little bit hard to find right now. But those are two good rifles to start with. Third on my list would be the Mosin Nagant, the famous garbage rod These things are everywhere. I don't know how well that's showing up. This is an old Russian this one was made in 1943. They're still pretty readily available, around $200. They're big, they're heavy, they're rough, but they shoot. And surplus ammo is still affordable for these things. But when you're buying these, be careful what you're buying, because most of these have been re-arsenaled. So what they would do is bring in 10,000 or 100,000 SKSs or Nagants, and they would tear them all down, and they would throw away used parts, and then they would just reassemble rifles out of stacked bins of parts, and then they would force match the gun using an electro pencil. So you'll see this one, the serial number here on the bolt matches the serial number. See, this one's been force matched. So see this old serial number right here has been struck out, and then they've struck the new serial number to match the bolt here. So this has been re-arsenaled at some point. And a lot of times they'll do it on this butt plate. This one matches the bolt. So they've used a lot of the parts from the original gun, but for whatever reason, they swapped out at least this magazine base plate. So it's been re-arsenaled. And then you can look at, and there's websites dedicated to all the stampings on these guns. This is 1943, the year is produced. This is the importer's mark, where when you import these guns into the country, whoever the importer is has to
we
import.
Can't really see that.
Yeah, but you'll see it. It won't match any of the other markings on the guns. But most surplus guns are stamped or engraved with an importer's mark. On this gun, it's right down here on the frame. I don't know if that's coming in right there. That's the importer's mark.
Almost. If you bring it closer to the camera, I can see where there's raised bits there. So we might both have, this should maybe tilt it back towards you so that we can see it
yeah.
Almost. Anyway.
Yeah, see, this says PW Arms, Redmond, Washington, and then up above is the original Beretta. So that's the importer. That's the company that imported these, bought them from the Italian police and imported them into the U.S. So most Milsurp weapons you get now will have some sort of an importer's mark on them. But the Nagant's a great place to start. There's parts are readily available for them, but you're not getting smooth, sweet, silky smooth action with them. They will make a big boom, and your accuracy will vary. Some of them are very accurate. If you can get one of the old Finnish guns from the Winter War, the Finns captured a lot of them and did a bunch of work to them and accurized them and made them pretty sweet shooters. So if you can find a Finnish, Nagant, buy it. But most of the Russian ones are hit or miss. Some of them have been what are called counterbored, where they go back in and, sometimes they'll sleeve the barrel and then they'll counterbore it, basically rebore the rifle. Some of those are terrible shooters. Some of them are fantastic shooters. But the same rules apply, which is, inspect the gun, check the crown of the gun, check here, open the bolt, bring a bore light if you have one, and put it up in there and then look down through the bore. And I know I can't show you this.
Yeah, if you're completely out of frame, by the way.
Yeah, no, I know. But I don't know if you can see the light shining through the barrel there. There we go. See the light shining through?
Yes, now we can see it. I can almost even see rifling.
Yeah, so you can inspect the bore there and see if you see any rifling. Your chances are good that the gun will more or less hit it'll be minute of man at 100 yards. But they're a lot of fun, and it's a cheap way to get into Milsurps. I didn't bring my CMP Garand down, but if you do order a Garand from them, they'll guarantee that thing's going to work. And if you have any problems with them, they will make it right. They'll get it fixed for you. So CMP and for the Garands and an SKS, they're fairly readily available. Sort of hit or miss. It's sort of a feast or famine with them. But so that's the, like I said, but check if you're going to buy a handgun, or if you're buying a magazine fed gun, Milsurp, check the availability of magazines prior to pulling the trigger and make sure you know what you're getting into, because some of these mags can be hundreds of dollars on some of these older, more obscure Milsurp guns. And sometimes you'll see them available missing parts. And if you notice missing parts, try to do a little bit of research and see how available those parts are. There's Numrich, has a lot of really good gun parts, old gun parts availability for fixing these things, but it's no guarantee. Here's another interesting gun talking about Milsurps. This is an M1 carbine. It looks just like your standard issue GI M1 carbine. And it has a GI barrel on it. Has all the GI furniture. It's got the proof stamp on it on the gun. Everything looks right, but if you look at the receiver, it's a different color. It's this polished blued. It shouldn't be. It should be this parkerized, this duller finish on it. Now I knew going into this gun that it wasn't a real Milsurp M1 carbine. I knew that something was off about it, so I went home and looked it up, and the receiver was made by a company called Aspen. They have a good reputation, but you have to be careful with some of these aftermarket, like Universal, made some really crummy guns in the late 60s, and none of the internal parts are compatible, so you can't replace it with Milsurp parts. If something goes wrong, you have to find and cannibalize another old Universal M1 carbine to get it running. This one is all GI, so all of these other parts are GI, old stock parts. And the gun runs great, but I picked it up for $300 because it's not a real M1 carbine. But you can find deals like that too, as long as you do your homework. And if something strikes you as odd, like why is that receiver glossy and blued versus the parkerized? Ask some questions, and I don't know if you can see it, but down here, right behind the rear sight, it says Alpine, which right here should say Saginaw or IBM or Rockola, the original manufacturer who did the manufacturing work for the U.S. Army. That's where that should be. So it's an oddity in the Milsurp world, but it's something to look out for. If you see something,
Scott, related to these Milsurps, and I think I have an idea for your next class. So
okay.
There was a question about commercial ammo in the Garand, but I'm going to flip the question and say, what about commercial ammo in that
carbine?
Yeah.
I run just standard old. I've run Milsurp ammo through it, and I've run modern PPU, and I've run even Wolf makes steel cased M1 carbine ammo, and it all runs fine because it's an original Milsurp barrel and chamber. I don't think there's any problem with it. I load my own now for it because it's just cheaper for me to do it that way, and I can backload it a little bit and make it a little softer. I don't need full power ammo. I'm not competing with it. I just go out and have fun.
I have a comparative question then on the modern commercial M1 carbines versus the Milsurps, if you have an opinion on those.
Honestly, I'd have to abstain from answering it. I've heard good and bad, and I don't have any experience, so I don't want to, taint the reputation of them without personal evidence of it. So I can't say. I think Franklin Arsenal has for the newer ones, seems to build decent ones from what I've heard, but I don't know. I can't say for certain. But I would stay away from the universal ones from the 60s. I just wouldn't mess with them unless it was one of the original, very early batch of those were all military surplus parts. If you can find one of those, you're probably good to go. But the aftermarket ones, the bolts and everything in them was completely different. And I wouldn't want to mess with trying to kludge one back together. But
I want to circle back to the M1 Garand commercial ammo question.
Oh yeah,
briefly touch on it because I think that's going to make its own 1 hour class. So.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I wish I should have brought mine down. They use if you're not familiar with them, there's a long rod that runs down the side of the gun that operates the gun. The gas system kind of moves that rod and ejects the round, and that's sort of the guts of it. And there's a lot of people that claim that modern 30-06 ammo bend that op rod. Other people, and you can buy an adjustable gas plug to tune the gas system to allow you to run more modern ammo. Other people swear that you can run it all day long and you're not going to hurt the gun. I don't take any chances, and I just run the 155 grain ball ammo, and I don't worry about it. It's easy enough to find commercial M1 Garand ammo. Everybody makes it, or you can make your own, and it's just not worth the headache to try. I don't know why you would want to run super high power competition ammo through a off the rack M1 Garand anyway, but that's my opinion on the matter. I've never been an op rod, so I don't know. What's your opinion on that, Ed?
I buy Milsurp from CMP.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Either buy Milsurp or buy, the box says right on it.
Yeah, the gun was M1 Garand ball ammo. The gun was too expensive to bend the op rod, and I'm not some of our other more industrious members, which is going to replace the parts. And
no, if you're going to screw around with super hot ammo, get a bolt gun.
Yeah.
Don't do it to a semi-automatic. It's just you're playing a fool's game there. Eventually, you're going to lose. This is a 1942 British Enfield that was a lease. It says U.S. property on it right here. So technically this was made by Savage Arms here in the United States and lent to the British for a World War II to be returned upon the end of hostilities. Interestingly, there's all kinds of websites for researching all of these different, I don't know if that's showing up, but there's a U with an arrow pointing out of it, and there's a couple of other proof marks.
Your lighting on this particular one is not as good as some of the others. We can't see any of the proofs on any of these guns. So
yeah, there's a proof mark right here. So if you research that proof mark, this was ultimately ended up in South Africa at some point and was used by the South Africans and then returned to the U.S. And I bought it in about 1990 for $89. And it came packed in cosmoline, which is this horrific petrochemical that turns to, it goes on like a thick grease, and then it dries to the consistency of, I don't know, mummy wax or something. Anyway, you can still see traces of where it has stained the wood, these darker spots. It gets down into the metal. It preserves the metal. It does a fantastic job of preserving everything, but it is a bear to clean. And now if you buy a newer imported SKS, it will probably come packed in cosmoline. And my advice to you is make a day of it or a weekend of it and tear the whole gun apart. There's all kinds of YouTube videos and web pages about how to break these things down. It's not as hard as you think. And throw it all in a big pot of boiling water and boil the cosmoline out of it. And then take your wood furniture, wrap them in a black plastic trash bag and set it out in the sun. And that will leach all of that cosmoline out. And then I took a brown paper sack and an iron, and I just ironed over the paper sack, and it leached it all back out of the wood and kind of restored the original color to it. And then I just took some boiled linseed oil and rubbed it on the raw wood. And then that's just years of, handling is kind of giving it that finish. But these are fantastic. These used to be super readily available. These have the smoothest bolt of any Milsurp gun I've ever, you can see after 80 years, just, the thing is just like glass. These are fantastic if you can find them. Any of these old SMLEs, not just the, these later ones, the World War II era ones, but the Mark 1s, 2s, 3s, they're all great guns, and they're all very, very similar.
You rotate the camera up if you're going to be showing the rifles so that we can, that way you're not, don't have to put it down in your lap. There you go.
Yeah, so the difference on this one is they made some changes to the receiver to make the bolt easier to remove and, lighten things up, and they made it more easier to manufacture and easier to strip. And then you can see the fore end on this is different. If you watch the movie 1917, you'll see the wood and stuff comes all the way out to the end of the barrel. You can tell the World War II ones because it's shortened a little bit.
So would you, when I'm just asking a question now, is sort of like, would you take the bolt out when you're looking at the gun in the store?
Yeah, if you know how.
Well, can you show us how?
Yeah, so
I love making you take guns apart.
Yeah, I know. You're just waiting for that day. So right here, you'll notice in the older SMLEs, they didn't have this little notch right here in the receiver. I don't know if that's coming through, but there's a notch right here. So you kind of line that up with this tab on the bolt. flip it up. Flip that sight up, and then the bolt slides right out. And then that way you can inspect the bore, you know, the way I did before by shining a bore light, you know, up through the receiver and then look down the barrel. And another way to check the bore on these, a quick, dirty way, if you can't take the bolt out, is to take a round, you know, hopefully a dummy round, but, you know, just the bullet and put it in the barrel like that. And this works for the Garands too. And if it drops in there too deep, the barrel's pretty much shot out. You know, if it goes down past the ogive, it's probably, you know, that one's fine. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, no, we can see it. Maybe hold it a little close, hold it a little closer to the camera so you can see it. Not that I would recommend anybody taking live ammunition into the gun store, putting it in the rifle.
That's why I'm using just a raw bullet that I have. No, but a dummy round or, you know, but that's one, you know, just one quick way. It's sort of a cheap, poor man's bore gauge, but it works. You know, if that thing dropped in there flush like that, then we'd have a problem. I wouldn't buy this gun, or I'd look at it and go, well, that needs to be rebarreled. But these are neat old guns if you can find them. They used to sell them literally in barrels at the sporting goods stores, and you picked your rifle out for $89 when I bought that one. But that's the bolt. And then,
you looking for anything special on the bolt there?
Well, yeah, there's a bolt head, and these are marked. Let's see the number on this one. So as they wear, they replace this piece of the bolt to get the head spacing right. And you can only do it so many times, and then the rifle is pretty much done for. That's your firing pin right there. So you want to inspect that, make sure it's not peened over or flattened or cracked. But I'm looking for the number on this one. I think they went up to 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and anything after 4, it was pretty well worn out. This looks like a number 3 from what I can see on it. But yeah, you're going to inspect that. I mean, this, you want this to be a smooth, polished surface. There should be no grit or gouges or cuts or burrs on this thing at all. It needs to be silky smooth to lock into place. So it's like anything else. This is a finely machined part. So any cracks or abnormalities, this bolt face, you're going to want to look at that and make sure that doesn't have any kind of an indentation in it where somebody's fired. Sometimes people will load up super hot ammo and the brass will come back and smack the bolt face, and you'll actually see imprints in the bolt face, which that's going too far. But you'll look at this little extractor spring, make sure that's good. But they're pretty straightforward. Anyway, I'm not going to put the bolt back in just because I know it's going to drive Ed nuts. So I'm going to leave that right there. This is the SKS. Like I was saying, this is kind of this was the Soviet surface rifle for a couple of years before Kalashnikov rode in and changed everything. But it looks vaguely like a AK. And a lot of guys will take these things and try to make them look like AKs. They're not. They never were. Please don't. Just leave the gun alone. It's perfectly fine. But this one is a Russian, and it's got I don't know if I can show it, the star on the. I
can barely see it, but I can see that there is a star there. Maybe when you're showing the proof marks, just point where they're supposed to be.
Yeah, this has the year of manufacture. Yeah, it has the year of manufacture, 1954. Then it has the star with the arrow in it, and that's the proof mark of the Tula arsenal. So with this one, you're going to look at the bolt right here. There's a serial number there, and there's a serial number here on the receiver, right along the side, and then there's a serial number on the magazine, and then often there'll be a serial number stamped into the butt of the rifle. So if those all match up, that gun's that's a really nice gun. A lot of them have been force matched, like my Mosin, where they've stamped out the old serial number and etched in a new one or stamped the new one in. This one's Russian-made Tula, so it's fairly unusual. These draw a premium right now because the Russian ones are just harder to get. But you can see also that this has a milled bolt. You can see the mill marks in there. The Chinese ones They stamped a lot of pieces. They used stamped metal in some places that were machined in the earlier ones, but you're going to want to just draw your bolt back, and then be careful with this. You're going to want to keep a little tension on the bolt and push down on the mag release.
And we, oh no, I thought you knocked your audio out.
No, but you can open the mag and then just make sure that's running smoothly. Nobody's going to let you take this apart, in the store, I don't think. If they do, you pop the dust cover off, lift this up, this comes off, and then you can pull the whole bolt out and inspect everything. But most places aren't going to let you field strip guns on the counter. But you can open this up and look into the guts of the gun and look for any, let me get some light here. Look for rust and corrosion and crud down in there.
Obviously, you're not going to have any of that because you wouldn't have bought the gun.
No, I wouldn't. But, you're going to want to look for that. These magazines, like I said, check the tension on this spring. These magazines are getting harder and harder to find. A lot of people took these out when they got these guns in the 80s and 90s and threw them away and then put, they make aftermarket 30-round magazines that look like an AK mag. They took these out and lost them. And now they want to put them back, or they're illegal now. You can't run them with a 30-round magazine in some states. So finding the original 10-rounders is not an easy thing to do anymore. They do make some aftermarket ones, but they don't run really well. So if it's got the original 10-round mag, that's a bonus. It doesn't even matter if it's serial numbered to the gun because they're getting harder and harder to find. If you can find them on eBay, they're $50, $75, whatever the guy wants for them, and whatever you're willing to pay for it. I grab them at gun shows when I see them and trade them away to people for things I need. I'm that guy, sorry. But if you need one, give me a holler. I've got an extra one.
So I know we haven't gotten to the Webley yet, but while we're on the sort of the rifles, I mean, so you're looking for, if you can take the bolt out of the bolt gun, you want to take the bolt out of the bolt gun, inspect the bolt face, you want to look at the bore, you want to, fiddle with that magazine. So that is an SMLE, which means that it.
Yep.
Maybe you should put that gun on the floor. You're making me.
It's fine. The gun is fine.
The gun is fine. That is an SMLE, which means it has a short magazine, which means it's technically removable. But nobody.
Yeah, that's down here. There it is. Those are hard to find too. They're remanufacturing these now. I can't speak to the how good they are, but you can buy now 10-round magazines. And the nice thing about these is you can load them with stripper clips. You see this little kind of scalloped thing here. You take a stripper clip. They come with these, the SMLEs, they're 5-round stripper clips, and you can load them, just 2 stripper clips, and you can load the magazine quickly. You can also pull the mag out and load it that way if you don't have stripper clips. The SKS also takes stripper clips, and they're pretty easy to get. And
you can also load the SMLE 1 round at a time, just as if you were loading any other gun.
Yeah,
but that's not nearly as much fun.
No, it's. But yeah, look, and if you can take the magazine out, if it's a removable magazine, remove it, and make sure it operates smoothly. It goes back in smoothly. That the mag release works as designed. That's the overall kind of thing you're going to look for. If you're buying for investment purposes, that's kind of not what this is about. This is more about buying and enjoying and shooting. Milsurp guns, investing in Milsurp guns. Yes, there is a lot of money that can be invested in this stuff, but then you're getting into a whole lot of different rabbit holes as far as the absolutely period correct mag release, the right scope mount, or that screw isn't correct for that particular, that's a Mark II screw on a Mark I gun, blah blah blah. You can imagine how pedantic people can get about that sort of thing. All my guns are all runners. I shoot them all. I load for them all. I shoot them all. I enjoy them all. I don't want to own a gun I can't shoot. So none of mine are so precious that they don't get taken to the range now and then. This is an old Webley that I bought over the summer. I just had to have it. It's an old break top revolver, and Ed's going to make me take it apart and reassemble it on video. It's a neat brake top. So when you press this button down, pull the barrel, and the spent cartridges eject straight out as you move the barrel. It pushes that extractor. It's really a lot of fun to shoot. But these, you've got to be careful. The 38 S&Ws were made, I believe, World War II. I don't think they made them prior to World War II. And they were a Webley commercial gun that they just co-opted for military use. And this one has a stamp in it that says war finish, because it's got a rougher, almost parkerized finish on it. I believe it's blued, but it's not nearly as smooth and fine as a commercial Webley would be. And then it's got dozens of proof marks all over it from the crown. You know, they inspected the heck out of these guns. Every cylinder is proof marked. You know, each one of these has a stamp where it's been proofed. And I really wish I could show the detail on these. It's pretty interesting to sit down with a laptop and look up all these proof marks, because it gives you the story of the gun, where it was made. You know, a lot of times you can discern, you know, where it served, you know, which countries it might have served in, over, you know, if it was lend-leased or maybe loaned to the Taiwanese police or something. They're just fascinating old guns. But the older Webley, what was that original caliber? Was it a 44 or it was a 45 Webley? But what they did was, after they were done with them, they surplused them out. They brought them to the American market, and they changed this cylinder in order to allow them to accept 45 ACP ammo. And you can tell those guns because there's a big gap right here. So if you're looking at one of these in the 45 caliber, be careful that it's not been machined down, because you don't want to run modern. I wouldn't want to run modern 38s through this thing if they would fit, because you'll blow the gun up. They're just not made for the pressures of a 45 ACP cartridge.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah,
we have a question about any particular things you look at buying a pre-1899.
Oh man, that's just not my area of expertise. Honestly, I'm more of a World War I on up guy. If I were to buy one, man, it would be condition. I would just, you know, the finish on it, I wouldn't worry so much about, because a gun that's 120 years old is going to have finish issues. In fact, if it were mint, I would be worried. You know, I mean, I would be leery of a gun that was in just pristine condition. I would really want to take it to somebody that knows those guns very well.
Yeah, I've got a couple, because I'm that kind of guy.
Yeah.
I mean, same things hold true, but it's going to depend on why you're buying the gun. If you're buying the gun because you really like that part of history and you just want one that you can have, that you might be able to shoot, then, you know, some of the stuff that Scott's gone over around the bore condition and the action and, you know, looking for rust, etc., it's going to be, you know, that's going to be less important than any of the superficials. But, you know, you want it to have all of the things. You want the crown to not be shot. You want the barrel not to be completely shot out. You want to look for signs that somebody's done that work to it, maybe rebarreled it or something. So it really depends on what you're looking for when you buy the gun. If you want a shooter, then do an awful lot of research on that particular gun before you go, so that you know what to look for and what questions to ask, right? So if it's different buying, say, an 1884 Springfield trapdoor than it is, well, I was just looking at something on the Discord channel, some 1869 bolt action French gun. You know, they're completely different experiences, and they're all going to be just a little bit weird.
Yeah. Yeah. You know,
be very leery of buying one and expecting to be able to shoot it, if you can even find ammo for it.
Yeah, I know John Getzinger. I think he's what is he? Offensive name on Discord, and Marlene are both really into those really old arcane guns and loading for them, and making their own brass. You know, resizing other cases to work in different guns, and they would be a great resource to ask those questions to. one thing I will tell you about buying Milsurp guns, if you go to a gun show or you go to a gun store, don't buy the story. Unless the guy's got paperwork to back up that this was brought home by his grandpappy that shot 3 Nazis in the head with it. Don't buy the story. It's just a story. Just buy the gun based on what you see in front of you. Unless he's got the bring back papers and all of the other documentation to substantiate what they're telling you. Because so many times you'll hear some old FUD go into some long diatribe about how this particular gun, you perform these great feats of marksmanship and, blah, 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 whatever. It's don't buy that. Just, humor them and see if you can beat them down on the price, but don't buy it based on the story. The story is nonsense. Or it's not, but I don't know. I have no way of knowing. There's no way to prove it unless you have the paperwork. Bring back paperwork is kind of cool if it comes with the gun. Soldiers were allowed to bring these things home as war trophies. My old Arasaka, I'll get into that one here in a minute. Soldiers, in the Pacific Theater were allowed to grab an Arasaka and bring it home. Some of them were, Ed and I were talking about this before. They had to make some modifications to get them on the, ship them home. But and then I think in the Pacific or the European theater, they were allowed to bring back Lugers and Mausers and things. But they were authorized to do it, and there was paperwork that was filled out, and with their commanding officer would sign it, and it was brought back into the country. You'll see a lot of SKSs that people swear are Vietnam War bringbacks, and you're like, oh, that's cool, because a Vietnamese-made SKS is worth a fortune. So is a North Korean SKS. But then you look at it, and you can see where the importer has engraved his, their information in the barrel. It's like, that can't be a bring back that's been imported into the country legally. And so, unless he's got the paperwork, the story doesn't mean anything. I mean, he may be telling you the truth, but there's no way to ever verify it without the paperwork. So, ask for it. They might have it. If they do, it's a great bonus, but don't believe any of it.
If it's a bring back, it's it's going to be arsenaled with all the same serial numbers because it came off of whatever line that the soldiers were.
Yeah,
there wasn't a lot of home gunsmithing going on. Well, maybe that may not be entirely true, but it's you're looking for the same thing. Does the action work? Does the bore clean? Is it the kind of gun you want? And is that what you want in your safe? And is the stock is the stock in decent condition? You want to look for cracks in the wood.
Can I buy parts for this thing if it breaks? One thing I will tell you about a lot of these old guns, which is really cool, is there is a lot of aftermarket support. You can still buy a lot of the springs. Don't worry too much about springs. They're a wear part, a consumable on most guns. And Wilson and several other companies make spring kits for a lot of these guns. So if you feel the recoil spring, say, just doesn't feel right to you, don't worry about it. It's easy to throw a recoil spring in a Beretta. If that's the one thing wrong with the gun, of course I'm going to beat the guy down on it because I've now got to go in there and fix it. But I know I can get all the parts for it. I can get all the trigger springs, everything for this. Wilson Combat makes them, and it comes in a little baggie, and you spend an evening at home with YouTube and a little time and a few tools, and you can totally rebuild that gun. You can respring everything in it. So don't let some of that stuff hold you back. But like I said, just do your homework on the parts availability and magazine availability will kill you on some of this stuff. A lot of, for these, I've seen guys have to make their own little trigger springs, because they just can't find them. So you have to find a piece of spring steel and then machine it down and file it down to make it work. It can be done, but it's beyond a lot of people's, area, expertise or time or willingness to do the work. So just be a little leery of it, but just do a quick look and you'll find that a lot of this stuff can be fixed as long as you go into it with your eyes open and knowing what you're buying. But another interesting, speaking of bring back rifles, this is a Japanese Arasaka. This is what's called the last ditch Arasaka. I have two of them. I have a regular one and this is a last ditch. I brought the last ditch down because it's complete and everything's there. My other one has been sporterized, and that's something, another subject in buying Milsurp guns is a lot of these guns were brought back from World War II or Korea, and guys didn't have any use. They weren't worth anything. And so people would just say, well, that'd make a great deer rifle. So they would cut the wood off, maybe shorten the barrel. They would do all kinds of things. They would put different homemade stocks on them. The action would be an Arasaka action or a Mauser action, but none of the other parts, the ancillary parts, are authentic to the gun. Those guns aren't worth much at all, except as donors. If you have an old Enfield and you need parts off of it, you need a bolt or you need, magazine parts. Yeah, it's great. Cannibalize some old sporterized, pick up an old sporterized one for a couple $100 and use it as a parts gun. But know what you're looking at before you go in. Like this is missing. There's no top wood on this gun, but there isn't supposed to be. A lot of these were brought back and sporterized, and you'd see they would cut it here and get rid of that piece of the wood stock to lighten the gun a little bit. They might get a gunsmith to cut the barrel and recrown it and move the sight back to make it a compact little hunting rifle for their kid. This one's all where it needs to be.
Would you give a kid a 7mm Japanese cartridge to?
My son's dying to shoot this thing. This is actually a very soft shooting gun. I think because of the Japanese stature, they just weren't that big. It's a very stout action, but it really doesn't punish. I would rather shoot this all day than a 1903 Springfield. My son, I think, would pull the trigger maybe twice on a Springfield and say, yep, I'm done. Been there, done it. But this is just, it's a pretty smooth shooting old gun. But this one is I'm fairly certain is a bringback because I can find no importer marks anywhere on the gun. I can't find anywhere where somebody's imported this into the country. And the only other way it would have ever got here is as a bringback. But that in and of itself isn't worth much. It just means that, it's kind of a neat piece of history, and that's why I bought it. And what's interesting about this one is if you look at it compared to a early war Arasaka, the fit and finish is terrible on this gun. The machining, they haven't even filed out a lot of the machine marks. Look at, you can see the booger welds on here. They didn't even smooth that out. And you know how meticulous the Japanese are on craftsmanship. To let that out of the factory that way, probably just irritated the heck out of them. But
can you bring that closer? I've never seen weld marks on an Arasaka, so that is
yeah, and that's the way it's supposed to be. If you research a last ditch Arasaka, there's all kinds of things like the sight. There's no hood on the sight. There's nothing to protect that front sight. These welds were never finished. They just welded it up and sent it out the door.
Somebody's making the comparison to the Nambu.
Yeah, except I'll shake this with a round in it. I wouldn't shake a Nambu. You'll notice the buttstock is wood with 3 little hobnails in it. That's the way they came. That's authentic to a bring back Arasaka. All Arasakas have this split down. People always think, oh, I'm going to buy that one. It's cracked. No, that's the way they made the stock. And they did it that way so that the grain would be strongest. It's hard to make a stock where the grain, because all of the recoil is coming right back into this hand grip right here. And so they wanted that grain to be straight, so that it would be, structurally stronger. And then they grafted this piece on, to make it stronger. But a lot of people mistakenly believe that this gun has been repaired, and all Arasakas are built that way. So, that's a obscure piece of knowledge, but when you see it, you're like, oh, okay, that looks correct for that gun. That's the way it's supposed to be. So I was just fascinated by it, and I got it for $190. And I love this thing. It's a lot of fun to go shoot, and it's really a curiosity at the range. Nobody can ever figure out what it is. It looks like somebody bubbaed it in their garage, but that's authentic, and it's probably worth more than the sporterized Arasaka that I have. That's in beautiful shape, but until I can find the right furniture for it and restore it back to the way it was, it's not worth much at all. And if you want just the experience of shooting an SMLE, go buy a bubbaed one, but go into it knowing that it's never going to be worth anything more than you paid for it, other than parts. So keep an eye out for the way they're supposed to look, and then see if anybody's modified those stocks on those old rifles, because that's kind of a killer on the value of them. It doesn't change the fact that it's still a fantastic old gun, fun to shoot, but there's no value in it really, other than to cannibalize it.
I'm going to define SMLE for short magazine Lee Enfield. Somebody asked.
Yeah. Another consideration with some of these things is ammo availability. The Arasaka, if you're going to get into the Arasaka game, you're going to do one of two things: spend $2 a round, or you're going to make your own. It's just not commercially available. One company does about a batch of Arasaka ammo about once a year, and
I think I got the last batch from Target Sports USA.
I've got 40 rounds of it in the cabinet. And when friends shoot the gun, I put the factory ammo in it. When I shoot the gun, I take 30-06 cases and I trim them, and then I run them through a 7mm die, and it reshapes the case and puts the neck where it needs to be, and sizes it correctly, and then I just run that, and it works fantastic. It's great.
And watch the reloading video, because you'll see him do those things silly to that cartridge. But
someday I should do one on how to take a 30-06 Milsurp case and make a Arasaka bullet, a round out of it. It's pretty fun to do, and it's neat to know that you can do that, and you can do it with some cartridges and you can't do it with others. But some of the old French obscure calibers are really difficult to find ammo for. So the Tokarov is a unique round. It's a necked pistol cartridge, and it is a hot shooting little cartridge. It'll go through level 3 body armor, but and you can buy it. They commercially make the stuff, but there's so much Milsurp available. There's Milsurp ammo available for a lot of these old guns. It's drying up, and it's not as cheap as it used to be. But the British 303 British is still available. You can still buy it. It's not cheap, so I save my brass and just load my own now. I can do it for 50 cents a cartridge versus $1.50.
Yeah, I think it's about $1.50 now.
Yeah, so I just make my own. I just save the brass and shoot it. It shoots the exact same bullet as the Arasaka. So it shoots the 303 diameter 30 cal bullet. This is the exact same bullet that runs you can load it in an Arasaka or an Enfield, just a slightly different case, different powder charge. So that's one nice thing about them. But look for ammo, look for magazines, look for parts. Before you take the leap and buy one, if you're going to buy a used Glock, you can't really go wrong unless the thing's cracked or broken. There's nothing you can't fix on a Glock yourself, honestly. I'd be happy to FaceTime you as we put one back together. If it's got a broken striker or a bad barrel, those things are super easy to fix. But don't, pay based on the problems. If you see the problems, know you're going to spend some money to fix them.
Yeah, I have a question. When I was buying my first Milsurp bolt gun, was the Nagant, most Nagant, and I was petrified by people online telling me that you need to make sure you check the headspace or the gun will blow up.
Yeah.
Now I know what the answer is, but I want to hear you say it.
The gun is fine. Headspace is a rabbit hole. I don't know that. Do we want to take the time to explain what headspacing is?
Yeah, maybe briefly. But again, that can be a whole thing. But the folks the folks on the internet, and I know we're guys on the internet telling people what to do, but the folks on the internet will scare the crap out of you for not very good reasons sometimes.
Well, it's all anecdotal. You talk to these people and say, did you yourself witness the gun blow up because the headspacing was off? Nobody's ever seen it, but everybody knows a guy. And I've never seen it happen. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible. If you screw around enough and do enough stupid things with guns, you're going to blow one of them up. I tend to back way off the line because it's not worth it to me. But I don't think, if the gun is in good shape, if the bolt face looks good, if the chamber isn't all corroded and rusty, and if the crown looks good, the chances are the headspace is probably fine. I would suggest you go after this, go research what headspace is, because that's just such a difficult thing to describe without taking something apart and getting out the headspace gauges. And
I ended up with a set of headspace gauges that I used once, and I don't even know what they are anymore.
Well, I've built I don't know how many AR-15s, and I've never had one headspaced. I've never had head spacing issues with one. They're all built to Milspec. They're all built to the basic military spec. Now, if I were building a custom bolt gun, yes, I would have that thing head spaced, but I would have it done by a gunsmith. I'm not a gunsmith.
Yeah,
I would take it.
That would be the advice that I would give too. It's like if there's any question whatsoever about whether the gun is operational, you either have the store that you're buying it from, have a gunsmith look at it, or take it to your own. It's like buying a used car.
Yeah, it's worth the $50 to have the guy throw it on the bench and take a set of gauges to it and say, "Yep, you're good to go." The odds are pretty slim that it's not going to be. I mean, you're going to see most problems before you buy the gun. If you're really worried, pay the guy the $20 to $50 to check it for you. It's worth the money. It's the peace of mind. I personally I bring every gun into my house, new or used, take it apart, clean it, inspect it, and put it back together before I go shoot it. That's me. I'm just, I have never taken a gun from the gun store to the range and just shot it. I want to know how the thing goes together. And I also want to get all the assembly lube off of it and, inspect and clean everything and then understand how the thing works before I go out there. But don't let taking one of these apart scare you either. There's nothing that you're not going to screw anything up. These things you got to look at your average GI just fought 4 years across Europe with this thing and taking it apart in the mud, and he got it back together. So you're not going to have any problems with it.
Yeah, that would be my other. That's my other thing. It's like these guns are easy. Like Scott makes fun of me because I ask him to take guns apart. I'll take the military rifles apart. Easy.
Yeah. All day. Yeah. Anything you need to inspect, you should be able to do yourself. You shouldn't be worried about it. And if you have any questions, or if you feel like something doesn't feel right to you, reach out to somebody, either me or go out on Discord or go to a gun forum and ask the question, and somebody will help you out. There's nothing you're not gonna wreck the gun. You're not gonna get it into a situation where the gun's just a boat anchor at that point. It can be fixed, or it can be. There's no, but I would encourage you to take guns apart and at least field strip them and understand how to clean them, if nothing else.
And know how to get them back together too.
Yeah, that's the fun part.
The first time you take that bolt out and you can't get it back in because you can't figure out why. So there's all sorts of fun things to it. I want to be mindful of time. I want to sort of recap sort of the things you're looking for. Let me see if I got them because I was paying attention for most of it. So we're looking for actions that operate smoothly, with the exception of passively the Mosin Nagant, which sometimes you have to have a winter, great big winter mitten on to thwack the bolt back. Don't be surprised if a Mosin isn't as smooth as glass. You're looking for actions that operate smoothly. You're looking for rust spots inside things. You're looking for the proof marks and the import marks, so you know what kind of gun you're getting. You're looking for that nice shiny bore, or at least a bore that's got some rifling left in it. What else are we looking for when we're
you want to research a little bit on parts availability, magazines availability, and ammo. If it's a standard military caliber, chances are really good that if you've heard of the caliber, you're probably going to be able to find ammo for it. If you've never heard of the caliber, do a quick Google search and look for ammo. That would be my advice to you. If you're standing there at the gun show and the guy's selling a 1941 Lebel, look up Lebel ammo, Lebel 8mm.
And speaking of parts, there was one question that I did miss. You named a couple of places. You want to recap the names of the places where you buy parts?
Numrich, Numrich. I think it's also gunparts.com. I think they're also an alternate URL. I'll take you to the same place. They're fantastic. They have a lot of stuff, and people sell them old broken guns, and they cannibalize them and sell used parts, new parts, remanufactured parts. Just about any military surplus gun will have a club somewhere dedicated to it, and then there's some guy for every gun ever made that is dealing parts out of his garage. There's also Liberty Tree Collectors is really good for old Milsurp parts. They have a lot of cool stuff. Things that you never thought you'd ever see again in your life, they have them. Bins of the stuff. So I would start with Liberty Tree and Numrich, those two. And to buy Milsurp guns, I would look at I would start classic. I would go in there with your eyes open. There's good and bad about them. Acme Surplus is really good. I'm sorry, AIM Surplus, AIM Surplus. Go out on a gun broker. If you want to see what the value of the gun is before you buy one, or you want to know what the going rate is, go research closed auctions on the particular gun you're looking for on gun parts, and you'll see what people are paying for these things. So you'll see what fair market value is on all this stuff. I don't care what the man's telling you it's worth. That's the actual value, is what it sells for on Gunbroker. I'm sorry, gunbroker.com. There's also, you can buy these things at auction, a place called proxybid.com. And you can go on and you sign in and create an account, and you can bid in online auctions on these things. And I've won guns. They ship them to your FFL. It's pretty painless, but you don't get to inspect the gun. You're buying it based on what they're telling you on the website. So buyer beware in that situation. There's no, it's an auction. So eBay is also fantastic for some of this stuff. You'd be really surprised what eBay has for used parts for a lot of these old guns. You can't buy magazines greater than 10 capacity on eBay, but you can buy a lot of other things for old guns there. All right.
I think we are good. I mean, there was one repeat question from earlier on that I just answered in chat on, what's a good rifle to start with? The Mosin is probably the cheapest. The SKS is probably next up for that. And if you got the extra cash, go for the Garand.
Yep. Go to CMP and buy a Garand. It's every American needs a Garand.
Yeah, well, I think every American needs a Mosin too, but that's besides.
Absolutely.
Fireballs during the day.
Hey,
lateral concussion blast downrange. It wakes everybody up.
Singly, the best muzzle flash you will ever have is out of a Mosin.
They are, and if you get a Chinese one that's in the carbine make, be prepared. Be prepared for some
shoulder therapy
and some shoulder therapy. But all of those old Milsurp guns will give your shoulder a bit of a workout. So if you've got a bad shoulder, you might want to learn to shoot left-handed. All right. Well, I think we are good. And it's 8 minutes past the hour. I think we've answered all the questions. If we haven't, well, as always, we'll be in the pub on Discord after this. I'm going to drop this video up on YouTube as soon as it's done processing, and I'm going to unmute everybody that's left to say thank you.
All right.
Go. Oh, we got somebody's television on in the background. All right. It is what it is.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Scott. There we go.
See you soon.
We're going to do that. All right. And we are off.